nosotros nunca, es la primera vez que íbamos a ser padres.
What I think parents should know about home visiting is that you can learn a lot of new things and tips and tricks, how to take care of the baby and what to do, and if you're, stuck in a routine and everything being monotonous, like they give you new resources and new tools how to handle parenthood.
It was nice to have them kind of guiding me, even though I was not a first-time mom. I felt like a first-time mom.
It totally blew my mind over time. So much information that I had no idea about. She was straightforward when, teaching me this stuff and answered any of my questions. It's just a really positive experience.
What I think that parents could benefit with the program is just having someone here for you, especially for first-time parents. It can be very isolating and it can be very lonely, and having the home visitor changes that, and it feels very good.
For me, having a home visitor is like having a second mom there.
A lot has changed. I'm definitely more knowledgeable taking care of her, and I know that anytime I need advice or help from somebody, I can just call her.
It's just that little positive nudge to, hey, I'm noticing something, let's find a way how to change it. And she's like, you know what, Amanda, let's pick you up, dust you off, and let's go over to, see about either getting your driver's license or seeing about, going to college, see if we can start something for you.
It's totally worth it. Like, even if you're on the fence at first, you don't feel like having a stranger coming in your house and teaching you about your little one, do it anyway. You get the help that you need. You get professional advice on things you may not know about your child. The fact that the program has no fees or anything, it's all totally free, is fantastic.
Yo creo que si conozco a alguien que está próxima a ser mamá, lo primero que haría sería recomendarle el programa, porque te entrega mucho apoyo, mucha información y más que nada como apoyo emocional, una guía, te da una visión diferente de cómo es ser papá aquí, quizás en este país.
Sí, pues es un bonito programa, porque pues es buena persona la señora y los ha atendido muy bien.
Pensé que nada más iba a ser un programa de orientación quizás para los nuevos padres, pero creo que nos llevamos una linda sorpresa porque Gaby es una persona muy cercana a nosotros, es como parte de nuestra familia, siempre ha estado dispuesta a ayudarnos y a escucharnos con nuestras dudas sobre la paternidad, y en nuestro caso, que estamos solos en este país, ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres, y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente, y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver los distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás, entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar.
Good morning.
Pero...
I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Mendocino County Planning Commission of November 7th, 2024. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting of the Planning Commission with participants both in person and digitally. The public may participate digitally in meetings by sending comments to pbscommissions@mendocinocounty.gov or orally via telecomment in lieu of personal attendance. All public comment will be available to the commissioners, staff, and the general public after processing by staff and can be viewed as attachments to this meeting agenda on the Planning Commission agenda page. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Jones,
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Purnell, Commissioner Wiedemann,
Here.
Chair Pollen.
Here.
Commissioner Bibini is absent by prearrangement.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, do we have determination of legal notice?
Legal notice has been determined on each matter on the agenda.
Thank you very much. Director's report. Do we have a report from our director today?
Good morning, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. I have just 2 updates for you. So first is that the amnesty program, which was the building permit amnesty program, was extended by the Board of Supervisors to the end of the year, so December 31st, 2024. We issued a press release, and so the public is aware. Complete applications have to be filed by December 31st, 2024. And then the second update is that myself and the Environmental Health Director are going to be holding a coastal community stakeholder meeting on November 14th, which is next week on Thursday, from 10 a.m. to noon. And that is going to be held at the Fort Bragg branch of the Mendocino County Library on East Laurel Street. And it's an opportunity to provide constructive feedback regarding the operations to each director, ask general questions, and learn of updates from the department. So we encourage the public to participate. There's both in-person and virtual participation options for that meeting.
What date again?
That is Thursday, November 14th.
Thursday, and it's at 13 at the library.
Yes,
At
and
the
a
library
press
in Fort
release
Bragg?
has been issued
Okay.
as well for
Okay.
that.
And that's just a
suggestion. Go ahead. Just might be nice to send like a flyer or an email out to all the contractors and architects, just because I'm sure you guys have all their contact information.
Understood.
Yeah. Because I don't think like my partner didn't know about it, and so probably a lot of people don't know about it.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about that. Is that just a general meeting, or is there a focus to it?
A general meeting. It's just really, we did this last year as well, and it's an opportunity for folks to come in and talk directly to myself and the Environmental Health Director and provide sort of constructive feedback on the department operations. It's an opportunity for both of us to be able to share important updates happening within our offices with the general public. So we started this last year, and so this is our second. And then in addition, we typically hold one in the inland area in the beginning of the new year. So last year we held that in February, probably something similar this coming year.
Great. And a question about the amnesty program. Has it been successful in bringing people in?
The amnesty program, we've had about 71 permit applications with varying levels of success, but generally if you have about a 50% success rate, we feel like we're doing pretty good. And so far we're on track for that.
And is that just for second units or for variety?
No, the amnesty program applies to any after-the-fact construction,
Okay.
but it does not. There's no exceptions to the zoning requirements. So still, you must meet all zoning standards. It's just an opportunity to not receive any penalties for after-the-fact construction on the permit costs.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for the director? All right. Thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item number 4, matters from the public expression. Members of the public are welcome to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking action on matters not on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the Planning Commission under matters from the public may do so in person, via email, or Zoom. If any members of the public logged into the Zoom meeting wish to speak under public expression, please use the raise hand feature to allow staff to add you to the meeting. And just to be clear, this is for items not on the agenda. We will be considering low-intensity camping and other things, and we will receive public comment on that during that period. But this is for items that are not currently listed on the agenda. Do we have any requests for telecomment under public expression?
I did not receive any telecomments for public expression.
Okay. Do we have any in the room that wishes to speak on anything not on today's agenda? All right. Do we have anyone on Zoom with their hand raised?
There are no members of the public on Zoom.
All right. With that, I will close the public expression. All right, moving on. Item number 5, this is the consent calendar. We will be looking at approval of the Planning Commission meeting minutes from September 19th, 2024. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar? All right, I will then entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second?
We have a motion and second. Can we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Purnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiedemann,
Yes.
Chair Pollan.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, moving on. Agenda item number 6. This is the regular calendar. This is item number 6A, although it's listed as 6C on my script, but this is 6A, I believe. Case number U 2029, I'm sorry, case number U_2019-006, Redwood Coast Wellness Center. This is a coastal development use permit to construct an open pavilion with a commercial kitchen, storage facilities, restrooms, septic system for effluent disposal, concrete sidewalk all around, accessible parking space, improved gravel driveway, and gravel parking area. Pump house with well, install 2 5,000-gallon water storage tanks, electrical pole, and underground services. The project will establish a reduced riparian buffer as well. And just for the public's edification, we have considered this matter in its full form once, and then it was rescinded due to some technical issues, and it's back before us today. So we will have a staff presentation, but I believe it may be slightly truncated if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so I'll open the public hearing now. Has there been any correspondence or telephone calls received?
Any correspondence were posted to the public website?
All right, thank you very much. All right, do we have a presentation from staff?
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Keith Gronendijk, Planner 3 with Mendocino County. The project is noted
Keith,
as...
can you make sure just you're speaking right into your microphone so people that are not in the room can hear you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's use permit 2019-0006, Redwood Coast Wellness Center. The applicant is Redwood Coast Wellness Center. Agent is Deborah Lennox. Here is the project location and aerial photograph. And I have a short narrative. Due to a noticing error, this Commission's original approval of this project on September 5th, 2024 was vacated on September 19th, 2024 and must now be presented to the Planning Commission again. The project is located on a ridge within the coastal range and is approximately 1 mile from the Pacific Ocean. The subject parcel is covered by bishop pine and redwood forests and non-native grassland. Additionally, there are 4 ephemeral streams and a man-made pond on the property. The topography of the site is south and west facing gentle to moderate slopes that drop towards the previously mentioned man-made pond. The project site is directly adjacent to Bower Park, which is a county-owned park. Existing amenities include the man-made lake, a small stage and covered barbecue area, a bench kiosk, and 2 storage sheds. It should be noted that the only area that the proposed septic system and leach field would function properly is where it is being proposed within the Bishop Pine Forest, Isha. Staff has determined that the project is consistent with the goals and policies of the Mendocino County General Plan and the local coastal program. Here's a site photo we saw before, another site photo from Ocean View Drive. Here's a photo from Old Stage Road, and here's a better site plan. See it. Here's where the kitchen would be, an existing barbecue. There's parking here and here. And all the required findings for this project have been made. Staff recommends the Planning Commission find that the project could have a significant effect on the environment, but based on the initial study completed for the project and mitigation measures added to the conditions of approval, all potential significant impacts have been mitigated to a less than significant level. As such, a mitigated negative declaration has been adopted, and by resolution, the Planning Commission adopt a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program and grant use permit 2019-0006 for the project based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval and mitigation measures contained in Exhibit A. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from any commissioners for staff? Okay, great.
I do.
Oh, great.
I was looking at the new letter from the Coastal Commission, and it sort of mimics some of the concerns that I had expressed the last time we heard this item. And I was just curious if staff could elaborate on sort of the level of importance that you feel that it is to modify the project description to include the removal of the bishop pine. I think we need to kind of tease out if that's a critical element of us being able to proceed with this. Thank you.
If I may, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. So staff did respond to the Coastal Commission on their comment letter that was posted. And the project from the get-go, the only improvements that are going to be within that Bishop Pine Forest area that are those permanent impacts are the leach field locations. And those are the only feasible location on the entirety of the site that those leach fields can be located. And there have been mitigation measures reviewed and approved in consultation with California Department of Fish and Wildlife that will require a replacement ratio for every tree that's removed. I believe it's, I'd have to pull it up, it's 2 or 3 trees that would have to be replaced in its stead. And the applicant has stated that there is adequate area to accommodate that replanting, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has provided comments that they are supportive of the mitigation measures that have been proposed and don't foresee that there will be long-term negative impacts to the overall Bishop Pine Forest within that area. So as a result, what staff communicated with the Coastal Commission is that the required findings and the required supplemental findings under Mendocino County Code can be satisfied for this project. And anytime you're conducting development within an environmentally sensitive habitat area, there's 3 criteria that really need to be satisfied. That the resource as identified will not be significantly degraded. 2, that it's the only feasible, least environmentally damaging alternative for the project. And the 3rd is that all possible mitigation measures are adopted or recommended for adoption. So those 3 criteria have been satisfied for this.
Great, thank you, because I saw in that letter they were asking for alternatives, and although I haven't, maybe I missed the documentation, but I didn't think I saw documentation on that, but it sounds like the work was done.
Yes, so the septic designer they evaluated the entire site at this entire property, and this was the only location that soils perked at a sufficient rate to be able to accommodate a septic system.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions from any commissioners? All right, do we have the applicant available to speak on this? Like not. All right.
Excuse me, Chair, I do see a hand raised by Deborah Lennox.
Oh, okay, great. Ms. Lennox?
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, commissioners. Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank the staff for handling this project has been through a lot of changes from the beginning of the first submittal. We've downsized it significantly and removed quite a bit of development. When I looked at the letter from Ms. Jansen, I saw that what she was referring to, I think, was an artifact from the previous submittal. So she was looking at a much larger area of Bishop Pine impact, and we're really only looking at the little small area to the left, which is the leach field, which, as Julia mentioned, we did a thorough walkthrough with Jennifer Garrison from Fish and Wildlife and Rhiannon from WRA, and they identified, all the plants that were growing in the area and how to encourage the forest to continue to grow. And then, as Julia mentioned, we do have conditions of approval, it looks like, from the biological survey, and they are going to replace the trees 2 to 1. Also, there's a, let's see, what does it say? Bio 1, minimize vegetation removal to the greatest extent. Bio 2, all construction materials shall utilize non-native grassland and develop areas. Replacement of Bishop Pines for installation of leach field or any other project activity will have the requirement of a minimum of 2 to 1 trees restored, trees removed. Replacement may include natural regeneration or supplemental plantings of trees from local seed stock. Prior to ground disturbance in the proposed leach fields, characteristics of the Bishop Pine Forest shall be collected to visually monitor reestablishment progress. Natural recruitment will be the preferred method of replacement. Should natural recruitment not succeed, supplemental plantings shall be necessary. And when we were doing our site visit, Jennifer was explaining this to the board members who were present, who are the stewards of the property. They've already begun invasive plant removal. They're encouraging the native growth. So it was very productive as far as the clients being very willing and eager actually to help restore the native plantings in the area and help the forest grow. So I think we've done the best we can to minimize the impact on the Bishop Pine Forest. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't know if you saw the full biological survey, but it talks all about this.
Any questions for the applicant from the commission? No. Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Lennox. We may call on you again if we have any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll now take public comment on this item. The commission will start with comments in the room and then hear from telecommenters that are connected virtually via Zoom. When called to speak, please state your name for the record. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are asked to please address their comments to the meeting chair and refrain from using profanity or engaging in conversation with members of the audience or staff. Are there any members of the room who wish to speak on this item? All right, seeing no one come forward. Are there any members on Zoom who wish to speak on this item?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, great. I'll close the public comment on this end. Do we have any final remarks from staff?
No final remarks, thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Lennox, do you have any final remarks? Hearing none. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't unmuted. But, no, we were very thorough. Everyone was very thorough last time. I just want to thank the staff again for handling the glitches and jumping over the hurdles here and getting us to the point where this is actually all the ducks are in a row. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All right, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Purnell, do you have any final questions for staff or the applicant?
No.
Commissioner Jones?
I just have a final comment. I think at our last hearing we requested a better site plan and it didn't get included, and just a reminder that when we ask for something, because the site plan was particularly hard to decipher. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Wiedemann? No. All right, and I don't have any other comments either. So I'll close the public hearing at this point, and the matter is now before the commission. Do we have any additional discussion before we invite a motion? All right, I'll invite a motion then.
All right, I'll move that we adopt the resolution of the Planning Commission of the County of Mendocino to for U 2019-006 for the Redwood Coast Wellness Center to adopt the certified MND and the coastal development permit, subject to all conditions, special conditions, and mitigation measures.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Wiedemann seconds. Thank you. All right. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Wiedemann?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell?
Yes.
Chair Pollin?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great. Thank you. All right, moving on. Item number 6B. This is case number UR_2024-0001, Crown Castle GT Company, LLC. This is the renewal of a use permit UM 25-00/2013 to allow an existing cellular antenna facility to remain. The renewal would be granted for a 10-year period. I'll now open the public hearing. Have we received any correspondence and/or telephone calls?
All correspondence have been posted to the website.
Thank you. All right, may we have a presentation from staff, please?
Yes. Technical difficulties. There we go. So this is use permit 2024-001, or use permit renewal 2024-0001. and it's a renewal of use permit UM 25-00/2013. Applicant is Crown Castle GT Company LLC, and the agent is Virtual Sitewalk LLC, Jacob Hamilton. Here's a project location and aerial photograph. The subject site is in this little square here, or rectangle. And project background, the renewal of use permit modification mentioned earlier for another 10-year period. The aforementioned use permit modification expired on December 19th, 2023. The applicant has previously applied for an administrative permit to install additional equipment to the existing tower. The original use permit for the tower was approved in 2000, and there have been numerous modifications and additions to the tower since then. Here's a closer up view of the tower. It's a 55-foot tall monopole. Here's not a very good elevation, but pretty standard cell tower. And here's adjacent cell tower sites. Here's the subject property in there, or site, and then there's two to the southeast and one further to the southeast. And findings was the operation of the uses in conformity with the zoning ordinance. Adequate utilities, access, and other necessary facilities have been provided. The use will not constitute a nuisance or be detrimental to the general welfare of individuals in the vicinity. The use preserves the integrity of the zoning district, and the project is consistent with the conditions of the governing use permit. Final comments and recommendations. Staff has determined that the project qualifies for a categorical exemption from the requirements of CEQA per section 15301 existing facilities. Staff recommends the Planning Commission by resolution grant use permit renewal UR 2024-0001 for the project based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the resolution and Exhibit A. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from commissioners for staff? All right. Do we have the applicant available? I see a hand on there somewhere, it looks like.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead. Can you please state your name for the record?
Jacob Hamilton. I'm here as the applicant representative for Crown Castle. Just here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. If we have any for you, we'll ask them now. Any questions for the applicant? All right, thanks. Stick around in case we have any in a few minutes, but I would doubt it. All right. Let's see. All right, I'll now open this for public comment. When called to speak, please state your name for the record. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are asked to please address their comments to the meeting chair and refrain from using profanity or engaging in conversation with members of the staff or the audience in the room. I'll first take comments from any people here in the room. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll move to Zoom. Are there any members of Zoom who would like to speak on this item? Please use the raise hand feature if so.
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, I'll close the public comment then. Any final remarks from staff?
No final remarks, thank you.
All right, any final remarks from our applicant?
No, thanks.
All right, you're welcome. Any final questions? Commissioner Jones? Commissioner Wiedemann?
No.
Commissioner Purnell? All right, I have no additional questions either. All right, I'll now close the public hearing. The matter is before the commission. Any additional discussion before I invite a motion? All right, I'll invite a motion.
I move that we adopt by resolution approve use permit UR 2024-0001 as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval attached in Exhibit A of the resolution. Did I do a better job this time?
That was pro. Yeah, good
I
work.
made them happy.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Purnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiedemann?
Yes.
Chair Pollen?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess real quick, just because I need to go to the bathroom, and this is probably going to take a little while. So we'll be back at 10:30. Okay. Hey. Cool.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. En nuestro caso, que estamos solos en este país, ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver los distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás, entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar, pero lo veo de la misma forma.
Que hemos aprendido algunas cosas aquí y pues los han ayudado, como este programa los ha ayudado para seguir creciendo a la bebé, como con buenos consejos y así.
Sí, y creo que también ha sido muy importante el tema de apoyarnos con el libro y saber qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo, muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa, a veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro. Vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo, a veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras, y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia, sí, para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
El objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien, y que las familias estén bien significa niños felices, niños sanos, y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
She has made me feel like I'm important and I can go at my own pace, and that's all you need sometimes when you're feeling like you got nobody.
It was helpful to have somebody there kind of holding my hand and guiding me and letting me know this is kind of the normal. It felt like I was becoming a new mom, so it was very interesting and helpful, very, very helpful.
You know, there was that self-conscious part of me, like, will I be accepted even though I'm not perfect?
What I like the most is that she really listens.
The support that she gives me is special because she does it with love, and it's just natural, you know. That's all I could say. It just feels like somebody that I've known since I was little.
You know, I said to Jeanette, Jeanette, you're supposed to be with me for 5 years. Jeanette said, yeah, I know, I'm going to be with you guys for 5 years. That's when I said, well, I guess I can trust her. She's going to be with us for 5 years.
Yo creo que quizás pasó como a la segunda visita o algo así.
We back online? Getting a thumbs up. Love it. Okay. This is item number 6C, discussion and possible direction to staff regarding establishment of a new use type of transient habitation, low-intensity camping, which would allow a limited number of short-term commercial campsites on properties within the inland areas of the county. May we have a staff presentation, please?
Yes, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. So this item, just like you said, we're really here seeking to discuss and get some direction from the Planning Commission before we craft any draft regulations for consideration by the Planning Commission and also, ultimately the board. So we're here to really hear from the Commission what it is that you may want to have included in updated or in new regulations, I should say, for this type of use, the low intensity camping. And I know the Commission has previously, considered this during the Inland Zoning Code update earlier this year. And as you see in the memorandum, there are the findings from the Commission's last action on this. No, excuse me, I just need to take a sip of water. Okay, much better, thank you. So really the anticipation for this item is that staff wants to hear from the Commission the myriad of things that you may want to see included in potential regulations. And as is detailed in the memo, the intended process is to first come here to the Planning Commission to seek your initial direction. Then the department will be going in front of the Board of Supervisors to seek their direction, at which point we will then be holding stakeholder meetings with the public and having discussion on potential draft regulations. And then ultimately a new ordinance would be drafted, and that would be brought back in front of the Planning Commission and then ultimately in front of the board. So what staff did include with the agenda item is a copy of the ordinance that was adopted by the County of San Benito. And this is one of the, it was the first and one of the few jurisdictions that has adopted regulations for low intensity camping. So I did attach that as just an informational piece. I don't necessarily have an opinion of if it's a good ordinance or if there's portions that the Commission would want to pull out of there, but I thought it may be helpful to see how another county is regulating this type of land use. So in terms of the discussion today, I think some important highlights that the Commission may want to provide as direction to staff is certainly going to be about, the zoning districts where you may wish to see this type of use established, any sort of operational restrictions that you may like to see placed on any low intensity camping operations, the density, meaning the number of campsites that you may wish to see established at in particular locations, and the level of permitting that may be required for those types of operations. So with that, I am here to really listen and take notes and hear from you all as to what you may wish to see in some regulations.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the commissioners for staff? Commissioner Jones.
Well, I guess I just want clarity because it sounds like we're not going back to the draft ordinance that you had before, and we're really just kind of having a brainstorming discussion instead, which I actually think is good because it allows us to bigger picture concept instead of narrowing in so much. I'm seeing your head nod.
That is correct. So really, I think we thought that it may be most beneficial because of the concerns that were expressed by the Commission and the public with that draft ordinance to really just kind of put that aside. That was the past, and start fresh. Okay. So that's really what we're here today, just to start fresh.
Okay. So I don't know, you asked if we had any questions, Chair Pollen, and yes. I'm wondering if we can go ahead and start providing input, or sure. If you first wanted to go through with questions.
No, I think we can go ahead with some input.
So do you want me to start? Or?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the things that I think that I said before in one of my earlier meetings is it's really important to understand the difference between the coast and the inland area. And to that end, I did go ahead and make a little Excel spreadsheet. And I also just want to remind people that Diane Wiederman sent out a very good memo yesterday that illustrated some of the differences. So in the 4th district, there are over 1,000 campsites. So that's the district that I represent. And the district that Diana Wiederman represents has over 500 campsites. Comparatively, there are many fewer inland, and so this spreadsheet that I put together is a little bit rough, I want to say up front, and it's the number of HIP camps, which I kind of equate with sort of informal camping type styles, like likely ones that may not be permitted, for example, in each district. So what it shows is that in District 1, 11% of... They don't have a copy, sorry. 11% of camping sites are located in District 1, 0 are located in District 2, 16% are located in District 3, 49% are located in District 4, and 24% are located in District 5. And what this says essentially is that more than 60% of these HIP camps are located on the coast. They're not inland in the other 3 districts, and the coast is a much smaller geographic area, given that so much of it is timber resources production land or Jackson Demonstration State Forest or state parks. And so my big concern here is one about intensity and density of campground concentration on the coast, and the consequences that have for a couple of things. Big consequences for the road capacity of Highway 1, concerns about the impacts on our neighborhoods, which are rural but concentrated, whereas east of the Coast Range, the county neighborhoods are much more dispersed. They're not as concentrated. So you don't have many areas east of the Coast Range where you have many parcels that are less than 1 acre crammed together, or many parcels that are 5 acres or less crammed together. So I just really want the commission to understand that the way this camping ordinance would affect the coast is very different than the way it might affect the inland area. And so that's why I'm really wanting us to think again about having some kind of camping district overlay, because I recognize that the inland area is looking for economic development opportunities. On the coast, we're kind of touristed out, be blunt about it. Like, you can't even get onto Highway 1 anymore without waiting for 5 minutes until you can make a left. We're a little touristed out. And so, and I think the reality is if we make it easier on the coast, we're going to get a lot more campsites on the coast and not necessarily many more inland. If we make it harder on the coast, you might actually get some campsites inland, because people, there'd be more opportunities relative to the inland. I really think this is an opportunity for us to think about how different these two areas are in terms of their development pattern and the likelihood that you would have informal camping really influencing a lot of neighborhoods on the coast and probably very few inland. So that's my plea. Think about that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else that you want to brainstorm on right now? I'm sure more will bubble up.
Well, you know, I feel like if we address this big picture issue for a lot of people on the coast, we wouldn't be concerned. We can't address this big picture issue. I think this ordinance is going to run into a lot of conflict from people on the coast, a lot of opposition. And so I really feel like it's important to put this issue to bed first before we argue over the details, because if we're not putting this issue to bed, then Diana and I are going to vociferously argue for at least a 10-acre minimum, which you guys may not want inland. And so I just feel like resolving this will ease the way for everything else. That makes sense?
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Purnell, would you like to share some thoughts?
Sure. Thank you for that, Commissioner Jones. I think that was a good way to start our conversation. I have been thinking along similar lines as well. Any of us that are involved in our communities in Mendocino County know that each one is unique and very individual, and that there is a difference in the economies, the character of the communities, and impact to the communities that are more coastal and more inland. We have heard from, I think I can safely say, hundreds of people on this issue, write-in, call-in, Zoom, and certainly with the letters that we read in preparation, the public comment letters for the meeting today. What I noticed is that everybody that is opposed to the HIP camp, nearly everyone, maybe everyone, certainly nearly everyone, is on the coast. And all those either in support, just like blanket support, or calling for smart regulation because they want it, but it needs to be regulated, are inland. And so I think that we are all hearing that loud and clear. I think at the same time, we have to keep in mind that districts 4 and 5 are also inland districts. And so although I don't have any basis to argue with the numbers here, it's not totally correct to call districts 4 and 5 coastal districts. District 4 includes Leggett, it includes Piercy, it includes Bell Springs. District 5 goes all the way over to Hopland, the outskirts of Ukiah. So we definitely need 4th and 5th district folks to stay engaged, both on the coastal discussion as well as the inland discussion. But I'm very supportive of the discussion about a camping district overlay. It might be that the coast wants to wait to take action on this and let the inland area be the early adopter on it. Any lessons learned on it could be applied to the coast later, although I would caution that leaving the coast unregulated would result in exactly the same thing that we're seeing right now, because it's currently unregulated on the coast and we're still seeing HIP camps. So some amount of regulation or a ban may need to be considered, and frankly, I want to leave that up to the community and the advocates on the coast so that they have sovereignty. Julia, did you want to jump in and say something?
I just have one clarification I just want to make clear. So the discussion that we're having today is really focused on the inland area, and there's inland areas that abut the coastal zone boundary, but the coastal zone itself is under a separate division of the zoning code and not what we are talking about as part of today's item.
Understood. And
Yeah.
when I talk about the coastal area,
Yeah.
I'm not referring to the coastal zone.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure we
for
were
the
clear with the
benefit of
public.
the public.
And to be clear, neither was I.
Yeah.
I'm more thinking about from the top of the coastal range west would be the coastal area, and from the top of the coastal range east would be the inland area. And I think that's kind of a natural geographic description. And I agree, it does bisect a little bit districts 4 and 5, but the majority of the HIP camps are not on the east side of the Coast Range. They're on the west side of the coast.
Understood, and that's exactly what I would expect as well. So again, to be clear, when I talk about the coastal area, I'm referring to some area inland, whether it's 5 miles inland, 6 miles inland, whether it's watershed based. I welcome comment from the public when we go out and workshop this, but I think we do need to treat this separately. With that said, I also want to look at sensible regulation. I am not interested at all in over-regulating light impact camping. I think over-regulating is just regulating it out of existence. We saw some of that happen through the cannabis program. I think it's a misuse of public policy to regulate it out of existence, and it's not an honest approach with the public. So I think if we're encouraging folks to run clean businesses and pay taxes and contribute to the economy and minimize or eliminate nuisance on neighbors, we need to make that achievable. So that's just a general comment. And then although I know that we don't want to dredge up the past, I do think with the hours that we spent and with all the public comment that we heard on the work that we did previously on a draft version of this ordinance, I do want to go back and refer to the staff memo from July 30th. In particular, table 20.176A, I think is really good, and I don't want to lose that. I'm not attached to every single number there, but that table is really, really good. So let's not lose that. That's for those that don't have it in front of them, that's the table that identifies which parcel sizes can do this and then what is required, whether it's a business license, an administrative permit, or a use permit. Additionally, some of the ideas that we had discussed this summer, I don't want to lose as well. We had talked about 250-foot setbacks from any off-site residence. I feel strongly that occupancy limits should mimic state and national parks and be at 2 tents, 1 recreational vehicle, and 8 individuals per site. Obviously, sanitation requirements are important. I really liked the language that we came up with. Property owner shall maintain sanitation facilities that are fully self-contained or connected to a permitted sewage disposal system serving the property. I do not support ADA bathrooms. It's too great of an entry barrier. We've already learned that through the cannabis program. Obviously, we need to take measures to make sure that fire will not be a community concern. And on-site local hosts are a must, an absolute must. And then the other item that I wanted to hit before I pass it on to the next commissioner is I really like the language that we came up with regards to the requirements for applicants on private roads to notify adjacent neighbors. I want to make sure that we don't penalize those people inland that live on private roads. It's a lot of people that lives on private roads. And it turns out that a nuisance is a nuisance. It's not the fact that nuisances only happen on private roads and don't happen on public roads. So I think we really need to regulate for nuisance, not for public versus private roads. That feels arbitrary. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Wiedemann?
Well, thank you. I'm glad that the commission sees, or the 3 people see that we have a bifurcated county. Impacts and development and existing, what do we want to say, tourism areas. And, you know, during this whole thing, I kind of started going around and figuring out, well, how many campsites do we have already? Legal campsites that are, you know, paid campsites. And I wrote that there's over 1,000 in the 4th district, and there's over 500 in the 5th district. That's campsites. And I went through all the different campgrounds, right? And we kind of coordinated some of these. Well, what are the numbers? What are we looking at? I think I'm happy to hear that there's an acknowledgement the impacts are going to be different in different areas. And when I talk about the coast, I'm not talking about the local coastal plan area. I'm talking about all the ridges, all the people who live near the ocean, that every day they go to work, they come down a ridge and see the ocean on Highway 1. That's a lot of our density along the coast. That's kind of what a lot of my constituency is about. And then, of course, we have the valleys. And that's a whole other issue of development. And I happen to represent the 5th District, which is probably the moneymaker of the county. There's no doubt to me that that probably is the case. And the 5th District is highly, highly visited because of what it offers, which is fine. That's wonderful, and happy that we are creating access to economic gain. But at the same time, we have to protect why people come to these communities, right? Why they come there. And it's keeping the rural character, it's keeping the beauty, and it's making the citizenship happy that they have some peace and quiet. So I think the biggest issue where we're going to be on this commission and in the public is going to be a couple things, and I wrote about them it's part of the agenda. I sat and I got a lot of phone calls once again on all this stuff. So I sat down and went with what are we doing for low intensity camping? And I wrote this and I gave it's up on the screen now. And so once again, what is the purpose? Why are we doing this? Needs to be answered. Shouldn't the county be focused on housing? That's my 2 cents, because I have a lot of requests for more housing, right, for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into the details. So, and the question then has never been brought to, we need more information going forward, and that's what this meeting's beginning to be about. How much TOT tax will this bring into the county? Because that was a piece of the Board of Soups, was we could gain some TOT tax here, right? And we have areas that are suffering because of the lack of economic viability. That's all good, but we need those answers. We need to kind of get that out into the public, because right now there's this, we're opening up camping, but there's no details, right, on what's the gain, what's the pro, what's the con for these areas. How will these operations be monitored? I'm really happy to see that Commissioner, my fellow commissioner, just said, hey, there should be an on-site post, period. Because at the beginning, that was an hour away, and I think that honestly freaked people out, and from the people that called me and wrote in. So then I'm going to say, then how is the county going to, once we come up with an overlay of regulations and where these campsites are going to be, how are we going to define those regulations, and how is the county going to monitor them? Then how will these new campgrounds impact the existing ones? Is there going to be an impact? Are the people who have these, who have code bathrooms, I think they're going to come into they're going to be wanting to talk to us. So they have to kind of be addressed. The risk. Well, the example you sent in our package of that county showed a few photos. And if people who looked at those photos were like, some of them were horrified. One, all of them had fire pits, and had a lot of density. So we need to just kind of like get a handle on this, right? Because some people are really afraid. And I think personally there's places where we can create camping, low intensity camping. That's absolutely, we can do this. The other things I want to say is obviously impacts. Some people say 2 dogs per carload. I have constituents that are horrified about that. So I'm not sure where that's going. And we have to, like, we have no policy yet for any kind of, and this is the beginning, cultural resources. You're creating campgrounds, you're going to be needing to possibly deal with your landscape. You may have to do a slight grading. All this has to be discussed and worked out. Now, so with that, I think as I go to the process, we should do this in the baby steps. I think the precautionary principle is a really good thing to bring in here. I think we can start out small. We can start out small, and if it's working, we can use that and expand. So I do think we are going to be needing some zoning ordinances, you know, and I do think this is going to require a sequel review. And so that's time, that's information. And I really want the county, the planning county, and also where's the revenue going? How much are we expecting from this? Because none of us right now know where the revenue is going. I mean, maybe the vacation service group, I don't know. You know, the goal is we're opening something up that can offer economic help to people. It could bring, and at the same time, it might bring some TOT tax to the county. But we need that information going forward. And I guess that's, you know, and for me, zoning, where I live, I would look at an RMR 20. But if you're going to do it more rural, inland, and you have bigger parcels, or you have smaller parcels, but because there's bigger parcels, a smaller parcel might work, that's fine. But where in the general plan area near the coast, we are highly dense. And RR5s, RR2s are going to be a big impact. So I would start with the larger parcel, or we spot zone, you know, smaller parcels. I'm not sure. But I do think, you know, we need to look at impacts, not only to neighborhood, but yeah, to neighborhoods, I would say. And I have a whole list, so I'll pass with that. Oh, the one thing I do want to say, public or private roads, one of the big things that I get from people where in my district is, and it's two sides. There are a few letters there saying, hey, I live up a dirt road in an HOA. Well, and I was doing a camp, but then my HOA shut me down. So that was one letter. But the real issue with the county has to really get clear on the private road versus public road. I do think it will bring a lawsuit if you're going to go up to open it up to all these private roads, unless there's easements that allow that commercial use. Most of the private roads or the easements, I believe, do not refer to commercial use. And I think that's a can of worms that we need to investigate and figure out what's right with that before we go forward.
Are you concluded, Commissioner Wiedemann?
I am.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your thoughtful letter. I appreciate it. I have a few things to say. I don't want to go on very long because I think I'd rather hear from the public than hear us go on ad nauseum. But a few things that I would just say that have come up that I think are worth addressing. And if we're going from pattern to detail, I think you ask a good question, Commissioner Wiedemann, of why are we doing this? I think the reason that we're doing this, and I agree that there is a differentiation between the coastal area and the inland area, and where we exactly draw that line is going to be a delicate dance, because there could be some potential geographic boundaries that make sense, but that might also exclude some people that might make sense to be inside of this kind of a zone. But the reason that I think we're doing this, and the reason that it seems like we're hearing from the public in both written form and in the comments that we've received so far, is that there are a lack of economic opportunities in this county for a lot of landowners. And for a lot of places, this does make sense. It is a viable way to provide supplemental income in ways that are not detrimental to the well-being of the public, and that we should find a way to say yes to that kind of activity in a thoughtful way. I think that's the reason that we're here. The TOT tax, to me, kind of seems like a bonus that we get as a result, but we're not doing this as a driving force to generate revenue for the county. I don't think we can know. I think it'd be highly speculative to understand how much TOT tax we're going to bring in. We can't know until some of this goes into place. But in any case, it's probably likely to be somewhat negligible compared to TOT tax that we're receiving from all the other lodging establishments that are in the county. I also feel like I don't want to regulate this out of existence. I do think that some of the blanket statements that have been made around, what we have to have or cannot have could really sink this thing. I do agree that an on-site manager is an important one, and that would be one that I would be very comfortable having in place, because I do think in order to reduce the impact from between neighbors, having someone on site who is directly responsible is going to be the most effective way to mitigate that kind of an issue. I think that I agree with Commissioner Purnell that I think some of the work that was done for the back in July, looking at that table 20.176A, does make sense. There may be some needs to make some additional differentiation in there as well. I do think that potentially we're seeing a lot of comments around trailers and the impact of someone driving an RV onto a property as opposed to just a single vehicle, and that perhaps looking at the differentiating sites that accommodate RVs as opposed to those that just accommodate cars might be one other way to think about what level of scrutiny we apply to particular permits. I also think that having ample setbacks will be a really helpful way to mitigate the impacts between neighbors, and again, might be a way of eliminating parcels that would otherwise present the conflicting issues between neighbors, that if there's an ample setback, that it would maybe weed out some parcels that would otherwise be more conflict prone. I also am definitely in favor of occupancy limits in terms of the number of people per site and the number of sites per parcel. And I think that there was some good thought in both the work that we did back in July and in some feedback that we saw from the San Benicio proposed or their draft ordinance that could be useful, as well as some of the information that was provided by HipCamp. I also think that on-site waste, I would not be in favor of the ADA bathroom. Again, I think that would probably kill a lot of sites that would otherwise be totally suitable and appropriate for this type of activity. Again, we heard from some HipCamp operators last time about how they only allow RVs to come because they have their self-contained waste. And I think, again, if we're talking about hosting sites on places where people live there, they're not going to want to or stand for unsanitary disposal of human waste or of trash. And so, not necessarily true, but I think we have a greater chance. And I think we can come up with some thoughtful regulations that make sure that we're in compliance, but doesn't preclude places that might otherwise be appropriate. The same is true for generators. I'm not a huge generator fan. I don't like hearing generators, and yet there may be sites in which someone running a generator in an RV doesn't present any issues to adjoining property owners, and might make it possible for people to visit there in summer months when, especially in the inland area when it's hot, if someone needed to run an air conditioning unit in an RV. Yeah, I'd be in favor of quiet hours. In terms of fire, I do think it's one of the biggest issues that we're going to face with this. I have to say that my personal opinion is that thoughtful ways to allow people to engage in natural human activities is a more efficient and a way that's going to be more likely to be adhered to, as opposed to a blanket, blanket no on this kind of thing. I think some of the work that was in the other county that we looked at, basically in terms of if there's going to be fires, they need to be at locations that are maintained by the property owner and meet certain requirements for fire safety, is going to be more useful than saying you can't have any fire, because I do think that people who come to camp like to have campfires. And I think that rather than setting ourselves up for failure, we should create opportunities for that to happen in a thoughtful and safe way. Let's see. Yeah, again, I think the private road versus public road issue one is thorny and sticky. But again, a blanket prohibition on private roads would potentially exclude ones that are totally acceptable. Again, maybe that is another one of those differentiating factors in terms of what level of scrutiny a permit has to receive if it's on a private versus public road. But I would not be in favor of saying none on private roads. Yeah, the only one I would say that I saw some comments around that it should be prohibited in properties that are under the Williamson Act. Again, I think that there's a lot of large rural properties that could make total sense for these things to happen that are in the Williamson Act, that would not deter from the purpose of the Williamson Act in terms of providing ongoing support for agricultural production. And in many ways, we've heard from people who are in the agricultural world who would like to have these types of supplemental activities in terms of the agro-tourism. And so if there was a Williamson Act prohibition, I think that would also stifle those activities where they might be appropriate. Lots of other little things, but I'm gonna close my mouth and let other people open theirs for a while. Are there any other comments from the commission before we go to the public? Please.
I'll wait.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Commissioner Jones, would you like to wait, or do you want to say it now?
I can wait.
Okay, great.
I had a brief suggestion for staff that when this goes out to the public, I think something that'll be really helpful for those discussions with the public is to clearly and graphically, either through a diagram or a chart, show the difference between light impact camping and campground, so that people understand where the line is. And then I think when that gets fed back to us, that'll help as well, because I think we need all the camping activities all in one place. And I think that will help to facilitate communication with the public.
Thank you.
Yeah, on that note too, I think another piece of data that would be really helpful, that I heard some speculation here on the commission, and I don't know the answer to this, is sort of what's our occupancy rate at campgrounds currently in the county? If we have any way of, querying campground owners. I know from my own personal experience, from someone that lives inland who likes to try to go to the coast, it's not easy to get a campground on the coast. And so I have a sense that there's a pretty low vacancy rate on those facilities, but it'd be great to have that real data in front of us.
Yeah, and to that end, I can give you some reaction because I did run a campground for a while. In the summer, it's fully booked on the coast. I don't know if it would be fully booked in the summer inland because it's so hot. And in the winter, probably half booked. On the weekends, at least. During the week, very, very quiet.
Yeah.
And I think that would be true most places, both inland and coast in winter. I think that if the city or the county added more campsites on the coast, they would fill up. But that is not necessarily a good thing for the coast, because we are at capacity in terms of roadway and facilities. And again, I get back to this issue of the two environments are not the same. Inland and the coast are very different just from an environment perspective. Everybody's trying to avoid the heat in the summer, and that's why they're coming to the coast. I don't know, I could go into great detail about all of the smaller pieces, the regulations themselves, but just some ideas for staff in terms of bringing more information to people. I think it would be great to have a map for each district that shows the existing campsites on it, the legal campsites that exist that have been approved, You know, if you're talking about allowing 8 to 10 campsites on a parcel that's 10 acres in size, I will tell you that's 60 cars a day. That's a lot of cars. So when we say that that's not an impact on a shared road or a private road, it really can be quite significant. Again, you know, I recognize that the density level is not on the east side of the Coast Range as it is on the west side of the Coast Range, but when you add that many vehicles on a road on the west side of the Coast Range with the rain, you get a lot of impacts to roads that are actually quite expensive to repair. And so it's not just an issue of traffic, it's also maintaining that road and the dust level of the road in the summer and the noise of all the traffic coming back and forth. And I do want to make sure that these are all explored in the environmental document. And then the other piece that I think that would be really helpful for people to understand is what's the noise level at different campgrounds? What can people expect who are neighbors in terms of car doors slamming at 9:30 at night when people get in late? And the talking level, because for me, the 250 feet is the distance from the campsite, whether you call it informal or regular, to a residence, isn't really a function of distance. It's a function of how much privacy that invades in terms of sound and visual privacy to the neighbor. So I could see, like, you know, inland or anywhere, a campsite that's one campsite being able to be closer, but a campsite that's 10 or 12 campsites not being able to be that close to a neighbor, because it's going to have, like you said, a lot more potential nuisance impacts. And that's where, you know, the use permit thing comes in. I also am concerned with the county not having the resources to go after code enforcement violations around this and leaving it to the neighbor to have to take them to court to enforce conditions of approval. And who has the money and the bandwidth, the time to deal with that? And so that's why, you know, having reasonable regulations. And again, if those reasonable regulations need to be a little stiffer on the coast than inland, I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that, because I recognize that the environments are different. And that's why I feel like we really need to figure out this bigger level question before we dive into whether 1 acre or 10 acres or 20 acres.
Great, well said. Any other? We'll get a chance, I'm sure, to speak more. You can't stop us. All right. Well, then I'm going to move on to public comment. We'll start with public comment in the room, and then we'll hear from telecommenters who are connected virtually via Zoom. When you're called to speak, please state your name for the record. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are please asked to address their comments with the meeting chair and refrain from using profanity or engaging in conversation with members of the audience or staff. I've received one public comment card, which you're not obligated to fill out, but I'm going to start with our public comment card because I have that. And then after that, if you want to speak on this item, please come up to the microphone and identify yourself for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. So the first speaker I have on this is Greg Nelson.
And if perfect, thank you. Make sure staff pulled up the timer, thank you.
So, as directed, I'm Greg Nelson. I really enjoyed the conversation this morning. I learned a lot about the coast. My area is south of town, basically above Burke Hill, about 6 miles south of town. We have been doing Harvest Host, which is they don't pay for the campground. We've been doing it since COVID, so I don't know, what is that, 3 years. The campers are excellent. I have found one article, somebody lost their handkerchief. I've never picked up a piece of trash, and they're always very courteous. We, on the issue of fire, we don't allow any fires, especially being inland. We're deathly afraid of fires. I have already spoken in favor of this legislation, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but I had the pleasure of reading Commissioner Wiedemann's notes, and and appreciated them. There were only 3 items that I would take issue with. I would like you to consider limiting the number of campsites per acre. We have a large piece of property, and our campsites are approximately half a football field apart. So it speaks to several of the potential issues with having campsites that are like cordwood. And so that would suit us very well because we have a large piece of property. You know, I'm not sure if it's always clear whether we're talking about a legal parcel or a tax parcel, or, you know, so it'd be nice to have that clear in the language when you make the legislation. As far as dogs, we require all dogs to always be on a leash. And so rather than no dogs, I would hope you'd consider implementing that dogs always have to be on a leash. We would probably lose half of our campers if there was no dogs allowed. On generators, almost all of our RVs have generators, and we limit them till 10 o'clock at night. So, you know, I can understand the issue with generators and neighbors. Neighbors aren't an issue for us because we don't have neighbors within half a mile. But maybe if a time constraint could be put on the generators, because as was mentioned, it gets pretty warm in the summer. And if they can run a generator till 9 or 10 o'clock, then it usually cools off enough to where it's, you know, sleeping is comfortable.
Mr. Nelson, you are at time.
Okay, so just to wrap up, if it would be helpful for anybody, I'd be glad to have a host, anybody that would want to come out and see our campsite.
Thank you very much.
Your campsite was for RVs, right? You don't have anybody camping in tents.
Yeah, the bathroom issue is a problem, so we don't have any tents, just RVs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
No, maybe we'll see you on a field trip. Thanks. All right. Do we have anyone else in the room that would like to speak on this item? Don't be shy.
Hi, Osman.
Could you just speak right into the microphone just because we can hear you, but people at home can't?
Hi, people at home. My name is Melissa Osman. I don't know your name.
Commissioner Wiedemann?
Wiedemann, okay. So what you said, that is exactly, I live on the coast. I come down the hill, I look at the ocean, and it takes me a half hour in the summer extra to get to Fort Bragg. All the campers, all the everything. The coast, 100% would be impacted completely with, it needs its own regulations, it needs its own rules. But I also have a property inland, and 16 acres, we allow 1 camper in an RV, self-contained bathroom, and we do sound ordinance as well. We allow the dogs, they have to stay. We've never had any problem. We never even found any leftover from a dog, never. Most of our campers from the city, and we're on a shared private road in our inland. Okay. If you're pulling a camper, you are creeping. You don't want nothing to break. Unlike the water trucks, they destroy these private roads. Delivery trucks, you better have your kids in the house, because FedEx and those brown trucks, they will wax any animal or kid on that road. So I'm really excited about everything you guys said today. It's really, really awesome. The coast taking in consideration super difference, and inland seeing that we do need we need more support. And so I applaud all of you, and I'm really looking forward to getting my permit and And we have 16 acres. We have one camper. I'm in love with this county. I want these people to come. They love it. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Good morning. John Haschak, 3rd District Supervisor. And I really appreciate this conversation. It just seems that the reality is we already have these campsites going on. And so how do we regulate them so that we do have some kind of say in what's going on? It seems like what we've heard this morning is that there's people doing the camping and they're self-regulating to a degree. And so is there kind of a universal regulations that we should have? We talked about it a lot, earlier in the year, and we've made progress on those issues. I think that, the big issue is coast versus inland and how to differentiate with that. Maybe we need to start with a pilot program on the inland side, see how it goes. And, because we are looking at economic development, people do want to have some of these opportunities. And, if there are people coming from the Bay Area or wherever to camp, they're looking for places to camp. And so, whether we're involved in it and we can get TOT regardless of how much it is, and we have some regulation, it's going to happen whether we do something or not. So I think that for the county overall, it's good to get those regulations and, the fees and have people in compliance before it gets out of hand. So the sooner you do it, I think the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haschak. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? All right. Do we have anyone on Zoom with their hand raised?
We have a few hands raised on Zoom. I will start with Robert Van Buren.
Mr. Van Buren, you're up.
Yes, thank you. Am I coming through here? I'm a little unfamiliar with the technology.
We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So my name is Robert Van Buren. I live on the coast, and we have already had some experience with people hosting hip campers on an adjacent property. Unfortunately, that has not been a really good experience because we have had multiple code violations insofar as sewage and human waste is being disposed improperly, properties being trashed. I guess what the main concern I have is that sometimes these transient camps, rather than hosting overnight campers, they do become long-term camps. They do begin to look like homeless camps. So the experience we've had with this has been that there already have been code violations, and we have contacted the planning and building department, and it appears that there's not the capacity to handle these problems. So with that being the case, we already in effect have a trial program, even though it's not permitted or in the ordinances yet. And it looks to me that the county does not have the capacity to monitor or enforce what we already have. And I'm concerned about expanding this whole process when we can't even handle what we've got. So that would be my main concern.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Van Buren?
One more question, I guess, and it's been partially answered, but where did this proposal come from? Did this come from within the planning and building department, or was this proposal brought to you from an outside source? And if so, what was that source?
Thank you. I'll let our director answer that question offline for you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. So this actually came out of Board of Supervisors direction in June of 2022. And at that time, two supervisors sponsored an item to the full board, and the department was there as well, as we were in the midst of drafting our inland zoning regulations about whether or not to include this type of land use activity as part of that update. So that's where the direction came from.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Wiedemann?
Who were the supervisors?
Supervisors Williams and McGordy sponsored that item.
Great. Thank you. All right. Who's our next speaker on Zoom?
Next, we have Jasmine Randall.
All right, Ms. Randall, you are up.
Hello, good morning. My name is Jasmine Randall. I'm with Mendocino County Farm Bureau, and I apologize in advance if I sound like a bit of a broken record. I've spoken a few times now, but I just wanted to provide comment on the proposal for low-intensity camping. While we recognize that low-intensity camping can offer benefits as providing income for ag operations and contributing to our economy, we do have a bit of concern and considerations we believe should be addressed first, just to make sure that this proposal doesn't negatively impact agriculture, including our properties under Williamson Act contracts. It's important to acknowledge that carefully managed camping operations can offer a lot of opportunities for agriculturalists. As Mr. Nelson spoke before, it did benefit him greatly during COVID. But we do have a few concerns, one of them being the compatibility with ag operations. Ag activities, including harvesting, livestock raising, often involve, early mornings and late night operations, which might conflict with the presence of campers. So noise, dust, smells might not be in their best expectations, but this could lead to complaints and interference with farm practices or liabilities. So we think it's important to ensure that campers understand that they're on a farm if these operations proceed, and kind of having guidelines between that. For Williamson Act properties, the Williamson Act exists to preserve ag lands and open space through reduced property taxes. And we encourage commitment to keeping Williamson Act properties solely agriculture, but if it is decided to introduce low-intensity camping on these properties, they should be monitored to ensure the compliance and that these ag lands do stay ag lands. Another one is resource management, and the introduction of low-intensity camping could place demands on water resources, sanitation, as we've spoken before, access roads within ag zoning, which could strain the limited resources of farm operations, and measures just need to be taken to make sure that everything can continue as it's going. Another one is prevention of land conversion and encroachment risks. So we do believe that ag land should stay ag land. So we caution against any unintended consequence where camping activities lead to, the conversion of ag lands for recreational purposes and things like that. We do have a few recommendations as well. We recommend that clear and enforceable guidelines on the use of Williamson Act properties, if it is intended to go onto them, shall be established, just to make sure that these ideas stay integrated into the importance of preserving ag lands. Another one is coordinating with ag stakeholders and organizations such as us and our membership, just to make sure the policies both protect the viability of agriculture and benefit agritourism. All in all, we see the value in low-intensity camping initiatives as a potential support mechanism for ag, but it must be thoughtfully implemented with safeguards to maintain the integrity and productivity of our county's ag lands. That's all I have today. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Randall. All right, who do we have next?
Next, we have Cosmo.
Cosmo, you're up.
Can you hear?
We can hear you now. Oh, now it looks like you're muted again. There should be a button on your screen that will unmute your microphone. It was unmuted a moment ago, but it looks like it is muted again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Now we got you.
Hello. Testing.
Yep, we got you. Go ahead.
Am I here?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm gonna yes. So I'm gonna talk about selfishly my own personal situation. I live in Compchi. Been doing a hip camp for a few years. I paid transient tax last quarter. I paid
Cosmo,
$800.
can you hear
That's because I brought in $8,000. It's really helpful. When I first bought timberland in Compchi about 30 years ago, I looked at the uses of timberland, and it's very restrictive, but it does allow for campgrounds. But I can't afford a major use permit. I run 4 campsites on my 38 acres. Yes, I can hear you.
We can hear you. Go ahead. Yeah.
I guess I can try this later. Had some really good input. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
We can hear you.
So anyways, I don't know how much you guys have heard about my babbling, but I've been running this for 4 years. I think that as a small scale, let's start out. Yeah, test me out. Timberland on the county road, 4 campsites, 30 acres. I contributed, well, I got, okay, I'm talking. And so, yeah, I think that we should, as Wiederman says, let's start small. Let's start out in remote. Hip camp mission statement was not to occupy urban areas. They originally wanted you to have 10 acres. And hip campers are leave no trace. Their dogs don't bark. It's about the best boon to the economy we've had since the marijuana got killed. And I think we should. And just want to come look at my campground, that'd be wonderful. It's a perfect little field trip for you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments.
Or not.
All right. Do we have anyone else?
Yes. Lastly, we have Amy Wynn.
Oh, Amy, it'd hardly be a meeting if we didn't get to hear from you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Amy Wynn from Wynn Coastal Planning and Biology. I appreciate this this item on the agenda for direction to staff from the commissioners, and really understand and appreciate all the range of comments that have been vocalized today and written. I think it would be helpful to perhaps have for this item a technical advisory group, for the staff to meet with perhaps 1 to 3 times as they're crafting this potential regulation before or during the planning commission process. Technical advisory group representing a range of perspectives, perhaps somebody that's operating, a hip camp to, of 1 to 3 units, and then running an actual campground, which is an existing use type. I think definitely having a table showing all types of camping would be very helpful in helping folks understand the scale. When I think of low intensity camping, I'm thinking super low intensity, like 1 to 3 tents, 2 to 6 people max at a time, and on larger parcels with an on-site local host. These are the things that I have in mind. I have friends that will allow people that are riding their bicycles down the highway to stay on their property. And perhaps with that table also highlighting what the different levels of permitting are currently and what they might be adjusted to. And I think I only have one more item, which is when we have clients, whether they're inland or coastal zone, but when we have folks that are exploring having a camping experience, a lot of times what those folks are looking for is they're looking at larger parcels, 20 acres or larger, and the character that they want to present when they're looking to have more people is something that's like a rustic retreat experience, a spiritual experience for intermittent experiences throughout the year. So perhaps in with this, there's a consideration for a path towards that. I support the concept of a small number. So, and I look forward very much to the continued exploration on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we do actually have one more hand raised. The initials are SL.
SL, you're up. Can you hear us? Does that little icon on the bottom of their screen mean that they don't have sound right now?
It looks like their microphone is on.
Okay. Going once, going twice. SL, if you can hear us, give us a signal. Okay. This won't be the last time we talk about this, I am sure. So feel free to tune back in another time. Thank you. All right.
And I'll just note for the speaker as well, comments can also be submitted via email, pbs@mendocinocounty.gov, or mailed to our office as well.
Or hand delivered.
Or hand delivered. Thank you. I forgot the third
all
option.
Kinds of options. All right. Well then, do we have any final comments from staff?
I think there may be, but I think I want to hear the commission discussion first, but there may be some just wanting to sort of focus in on some of the commentary we heard from each commissioners and where I'm seeing some overlap, because ultimately in going and having a discussion with the board, I'll want to sort of, paraphrase in some capacity the discussion that was had here amongst the commission as well, and where you all are in agreement. And not saying that that's the final word on it, but where I'm hearing some crossover from each of your statements of areas that you're really in agreement on. So.
Can I just get a clarification on the process? As I read it in the memo from your office, you wanted to hear from the commission before going out to stakeholders. I know that we had a comment there that a technical advisory committee or some sort of other body might make sense. I'm curious what this process is in terms of going out and soliciting additional comments from the public, and whether other places for input from the public, and whether other places for input from the commission after there's something that maybe is a little more developed for us to chew on.
Yes, this initial sort of sweep through the Planning Commission and the board is really to get your initial sort of direction on even what you want to see this, how to see this land use regulated, because I think in a conversation with the public and stakeholders, it's going to be really important to be focused in on this is the direction that the decision makers want to be moving in, and rather than just having sort of a free-for-all of comments on, all the topics that could be associated with temporary camping. And then the staff will be really drafting draft regulations and maybe coming back in front of the commission and or the Board of Supervisors to seek further direction as we're going through that process. I'm not expecting that it'll be a single hearing and done, because I think as we're hearing through public comment, there's a lot of nuances and a lot of topic areas and possibly differences between coastal and inland. Certainly if we're talking about bifurcating the regulations from areas close to the coastal zone boundary to the remainder of the inland area, there's obviously going to be discussions about where that geographic boundary is established and how that's regulated. So there is going to be further discussion happening.
Great. I asked that question because it feels like there's a lot of ideas. It still feels rather nebulous. I don't feel like there's much. I mean, there's been a lot that's been discussed and that we've provided our thoughts on, but it's hard to say there's not really direction from the commission to the Board of Supervisors at this point. And it feels like in some ways maybe we need to start getting some of those draft regulations from staff for us to start chewing on and providing our feedback on before that goes to the board. Although again, I'm not driving this process, so I trust that you have a process. I just kind of want to know what it is so that we can know how to plug in best.
And if it would be helpful, I'm happy, like I've been taking notes here and I see some real overlap amongst the comments from the commissioners. So I'm happy to summarize what I've captured, if that's helpful to you.
Let's do that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so
Before you go, I just wanted to, I had a comment.
Please.
I just, because there was referral to the, this chart in the red line, Exhibit A, way back when, and two of the commissioners said, hey, that's not a bad place. For me, I've never been in support of this chart. I just want to go on record. There's things I can pull from it, but one, I don't think it's administrative permit for a campground. Two, I think the acreage has to be bigger. But that is, if we're bifurcating this process, right, and we're looking in different districts that we're looking at, whether I'm just going to call it an overlay of a spot zone, then I would be more open to it reflecting the need of that area, that district. Okay, that's
And if I may, Commissioner Wiedemann, I think I want to clarify at least what I heard Commissioner Purnell reference was actually this table, which was just for discussion purposes during the July 30th. It was a July 30th memo to the Commission when we were discussing the inland zoning code update, and it was has more detail than the chart you're referencing, and I think generally it was support for the concept of having a chart like this rather than the exact content of the chart.
Was Commissioner Pollan, was that your?
I wasn't saying this is what we should use, but no. I thought that we should.
I thought he referred
I said
to this.
we should reference charts like this so that we can have a framework that we're using as we move forward.
And I'd just like to make one comment. I do not like the idea of a technical advisory committee. I don't think it's appropriate because the idea that people who have campsites would inform this process more than neighbors or planning commissioners or supervisors, to me, is very weird.
I'd like to second that because I think regardless of whether or not it's camp hosts or people with other strong vested interests, I think what we're trying to mitigate is public nuisance and balance that with public benefit. And I would rather see public workshops than a technical advisory committee.
Agreed.
All right. Would you like to summarize some of the overlaps?
I was typing. So,
yes.
Okay, so I think the big overlap that I see is that it seems that all the commissioners agree that there has to be different consideration provided in regulations for areas that are proximate to the coastal zone boundary versus, more inland areas. So I think that was a clear agreement that I saw across the commission. The other was about having an on-site host. I heard at least 3 of you talk about the importance of having an on-site host as part of any operation. The other item that I heard was, this is where I guess it's a little bit different, but I think there was generally support about sort of quiet hours to address some of these nuisance concerns that could pop up, including generators, those types of noise nuisances. And then I think the other one is that I heard a little bit of difference, and so I don't know if I heard a total majority on this, but special consideration for properties that may be under, say, a Williamson Act contract. So not saying a prohibition, but maybe some additional considerations that need to be included for Williamson Act contracted properties. And then beyond that, I think I heard no ADA bathrooms a couple times from 2 commissioners, which is something that we'll have to look into because some of that may just be regulated by accessibility standards under the building code. But I think generally those were the areas of overlap that I heard amongst the commission's comments.
I think on the ADA bathrooms, if you provide non-ADA bathrooms, you have to provide ADA bathrooms. Whether those are porta potties or actually plumbed, you need to provide both.
Okay. Any additional comments from commissioners?
I had another suggestion for staff when you go out to workshop this to the public, and forgive me, I did public workshops on planning issues for 10 years, so I have ideas like this. I thought it would be really handy to work with a cartographer to come up with 3 different options for delineating the coast from inland, and that people could vote on that. And that way they're able to actually see it and see the communities and tangibly vote on it. Because as a commissioner, I want to know what the public thinks about this. I'm pretty clear what my other commissioners think on it and the folks that join us regularly for meetings, but I really, really want to know what the general public feels about that. So I am not attached to these numbers, but I wanted to suggest 5 miles inland from the coast as the crow flies. And so that's going to be longer by road, right? That's going to be longer than 5 miles by road. 7 miles inland. I wouldn't want to see more than 7 miles inland if we're going by a number, because that would rule out Piercy and Leggett and parts of Branscombe. And those communities identify more as inland communities and need the benefit of the economic development. The third idea came from Commissioner Jones, and that would be along the Mendocino Range. So it would be so cool to have those 3 options mapped out, and then people could look at it and vote, and we could just get an idea about what the public's thinking.
And could I just clarify, when you say coast, do you mean like from the actual coastal zone boundary or from the bluff?
The bluff.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wiedemann.
Yeah, what I'd like to take off of that, because I think that's a great idea. I always think overlays and maps really like start, bringing it to a foundation, right? Where we can really see what the landscape is saying. But what I want to say is, like for where my district, 5th district, 5 miles from the coast is not enough, right? It's too dense. You'll see that when you start seeing the zoning maps and things. But then we have to look at, I guess it comes down to what part outside of these areas, or where we're doing our pilot programs. I mean, we could even just do a pilot program and start out small, figure it out, see how they're doing. And if they're working and they're a viable income and they're working in the neighborhoods, that's great. And we go to the next level. But I think, we get back to parcel size, right? And that has to do with, as somebody said, well, if they're 40 acres and somebody has a 5 acre, but they're surrounded by 40 acres everywhere, then that 5 acre might be more reasonable. But not if you have smaller parcels, 2s, 4s, 5s, 10s. There's more density. So that gets back to the maps in the sense of when we're talking acreage, right? And so the thing with the thing I want to be very clear about, and I got a lot of feedback from this, from people calling my office, I can't even imagine there being camping. I own 20 acres, somebody owns 20, somebody owns 10, somebody owns 5. Who calls in? And they just say, the impacts would be ridiculous. So that is some of the, our differences in the sense of who we represent. And then I also want to just really hammer down, the bigger issue is also going to be public roads served by the county or the state as an overlay, or are you going to allow it up easements and private roads?
And if you do allow it up easements and private roads, what's the mechanism to get everybody who's on that road's buy-in to it? I mean, I think it's okay if it's up private roads, if everybody's who's on that road and who has to help maintain that road buys into it, but if they don't, then what's the mechanism? So,
On that issue, I think we have to be really careful to create discrepancies within the zoning code, because if I'm not mistaken, cottage industry can happen on a private road without any neighbor notification and without any differentiation. And cannabis, large-scale commercial cannabis, is the same as well. And so I think it's tricky. It gets really, really tricky to single out one type of business and say, but we're going to hold you to a higher standard than we're going to hold cottage industry and large-scale commercial
I
cannabis.
disagree. I think zoning does that all the time. That's what zoning is. We separate based on impact. And I'm not disagreeing with your main point that you think that there's an issue there that needs to be discussed, but I think we can separate out based on a use, because that's what planning does. And I don't know what the numbers of cars for a large cannabis is versus number of cars for a large campground. But if you have 10 campsites and each campsite is allowed to have 2 vehicles, you've got 20 cars coming and going at least twice a day. That's 40 vehicle trips a day. That's a lot of vehicle trips. So my main point is that we need to have a way of allowing people on that road to agree or disagree with it. Whether that's through a use permit or not, that's fine. And then my last comment is, I'm not seeing like a red line that says no transient camping east of the watershed or west of the watershed. That's not what I'm talking about. I just think that we need to, like Diana said, maybe the minimum parcel size in that area is going to be larger because we are more dense than the rest of the county. And we have, if you allow a little bit in, there's going to be a lot more camping on the coast. And frankly, to not allow it quite so much on the coast is going to be good for inland, because people will be camping inland where there's less economic opportunity. So I feel like you guys should be supporting us on this.
We're not supporting.
Yeah, we saw that. We saw that. You know, the one thing I wanted to bring up, and I thought Commissioner Parnell just referred to it as cottage industry. My understanding of it, to get a cottage industry permit, use permit, you needed to go through a use permit process. Is that not? Wasn't that? That's what in my days of those permits needed to be part of a use permit.
Under the recently adopted Inland Zoning Code update, it's subject to an administrative permit, which does still have a public hearing associated with it and notification to adjacent landowners within 300 feet and publication in a newspaper of general circulation.
And you also still have to make findings that it's compatible with the neighbors.
Correct. Home occupations, however, are accessory uses that do not require an administrative permit.
But those also are not allowed to have employees or more than 8 visitors a day.
Correct.
One other thing that I'd just like to clarify at the risk of saying too much is I've heard reference to 10 campsites or 12 campsites, but that actually has never been part of our conversation to have that many campsites. Every chart that we've looked at has maxed out at 9 campsites, and then over that goes into like an official campground, which is, you know, the next level facility. And I am not opposed to scaling that number down. I actually think that total number of campsites might be that, and the acreage, the minimum acreage size of the site and setbacks are probably the 3 easiest ways to mitigate potential nuisance. And so like 9 to me, the only reason why I could see an argument for 9 is that there might be people already running excellent businesses with 9, and I would hate to think that we're going to put them out of business. And I think we're going to have to also reconcile with those light impact camping businesses that were so on the forefront and so entrepreneurial that they existed before the regulation existed. It does not make them illegal. It just means that they existed before the regulation. So again, we dealt with this with cannabis, all the pre-existing stuff. But
I don't think that's correct.
well, hip camp has been altogether unregulated. It's a big gray
That's
area.
true, but that's not the same thing as saying they're legal.
They're-
They're operating illegally without, just because you don't have an ordinance that allows it, you can't assume that it's permissible. The ordinance allows things that it allows. Right now, the ordinance does not allow it. So the assumption is that it's not permissible unless you're doing it under the campground section of the ordinance, which none of these are doing.
So I think regardless of the interpretation on that, we're going to run into this issue with people that have been in operation. And my point was that might be the only argument for including larger sites that I can think of. A larger number of sites, up to 9, it's hard for me to think about putting people out of business. I don't know of anybody that actually likes putting people out of business. That said, I am personally in favor of a smaller number of sites because I think it's one of the easiest ways to reduce nuisance and impact. Sorry if I confused
that's fine.
anybody.
No,
on that.
I appreciate that comment, and I agree with you.
All right. Any additional comments?
I mean, one other comment that I think somebody from the audience said that I think is also valuable that goes off of what you said is to, have a minimum acreage size and then number of campsites per acre over that. In the inland, you might have a minimum acreage size of 1 per and then campsite per acre. And then in the coastal, we might say a minimum of 1 campsite per 10 acres. I mean, I think that's realistic for our area. And then the benefit of camping gets moved to the inland, and the negativity of it on the coast gets ameliorated a little bit by that, and I think that's a win-win.
We're at Anderson Valley.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Any other additional comments? Okay, great. Well then, I think then we will look to staff for the next iteration of this with bated breath.
Well, and if I may,
Please.
I do still see that hand raised from earlier. I don't know if you want to try to see
Oh,
if we can
okay,
hear that
let's see.
public comment.
Yeah. All right. SL, are you back in the room, able to hear us and speak now?
Can you hear me now?
We got you now.
All right. Hello, County Commissioners. I urge you to protect the residents and the private property owners of Mendocino County by not allowing the low impact camping on private residential properties. I think certainly in the commercial and the agricultural and the forest land, there are other areas where this could be very beneficial. Camping accommodations are already licensed and established for 1,000 people over a 3-mile span in the areas of 95460, which is Mendocino, and 95456 Little River. And the private residential properties in this range are considered coastal corridor properties, or in the coastal and the inland zones both. So that's a high density of established campsites already in the area, and that provides an overabundance of accommodations for those wishing to access the nature and outdoor activities and parks. Additionally, that multiplies far over what the population, and it's a dense population in this particular area, but it far exceeds the population that already exists there. So virtually you're giving the visitors, the campsite visitors, more power over their characteristics of the community and the neighborhoods than you are the people that are living and own the properties and are part of the community. So with the increase of the density in residential neighborhoods already on the residential properties through the ADU and GADU additions, those changes need to be allowed to settle in just to understand and adjust to the full impacts on our neighborhoods and to meet the requirements and priority of providing secure, safe, and quiet homes without disruption. And adding camping would undermine those efforts. And the political positioning of the low impact camping issue over the desires of the Mendocino and California private property owners is not to be underestimated. because this is a low impact camping state Senate bill that's in the progress, SB 620, and which the Mendocino Board of Supervisors, before extensive public input, registered their support for in August of 2024. The bill is designed to circumvent the limitations of current law, the Special Occupancy Parks Act, with language to release low impact camping areas from those restrictions. In the progress state bill, it was designated and is well coordinated with HipCamp and other corporate entities. HipCamp, being the driver of the bill, is an online booking platform, started with seed funding and venture capital, and is positioning itself to profit immensely from our privately owned lands at the expense of our homes and neighborhoods, our peace, and at our peril. SB 620 language also states, when completed, it is positioned to take effect immediately as an urgency statute. I don't see this as an urgency, and I would like to suggest that you move ahead slowly. And certainly I agree with Commissioners Joan and Wiedemann to protect our coastal zones that already have an increase of density and are providing a lot of tourist facilities, but also allows for local residents to live in peace and enjoy our character. So I urge you to prohibit low impact camping of any form on residential properties. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Can you please state your name for the record?
Oh, certainly. Suzanne Limley Shine, Mendocino.
Thank you very much. All right. Well then, seeing no one else. Oh, we do have some people in the room who are getting up the gumption now. Come on up.
Actually,
Please state your name for the record.
Teresa Zadroga Haas. I'm a resident of Fort Bragg. It's more of a question and something I would like the commission to be sure, if possible, I don't even know if it's possible, that you take into consideration, and that is with the fire insurance crisis in the state, how this may or may not impact the ability to get fire insurance, and whether people who do have one or more campsites on their property, where if there is going to be a host required, I'm assuming as a residence, are they making sure that their fire insurance policies cover this additional activity? And whether or not there could be potential impact to neighbors being unable to get insurance now because their insurance company has found out that you've got a campsite next door. So those are some of the potential impacts that I'd like to make sure are researched. And if we can bring that information forward and have that discussion during the stakeholder meetings, that would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want a last bite of the apple? All right, come on down.
My name is Don Shanley. I live in Philo, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm not going to read my statement. I get so emotional about this after living in this county for 54 years and see the encroachment of urbanization in our area, which I think is primarily why people moved here in the first place, but we won't beat that all to death. I guess the overall thing is all of these discussions and what we can do and not do, they're absolutely meaningless if the county has no ability to enforce. Try to file a complaint for a code violation. Good luck. I mean, who is going to enforce whatever rules you came up with? Who is going to drive out to these, 3 to 4 mom and pop campsites and say, no, you can't have your generator on past 10 o'clock. No, any of these rules, and any of what it comes up, who is going to enforce it? Is the county going to spend a bunch of dough for that? Who's going to pay for the fire support? It's absurd. This is just so transparently some kind of deal between Senator McGuire and his SB 620 and a private startup, HipCamp, okay? It's a venture capital fueled thing. Read their website. They want to monetize open space. They want to commodify a what do they call it? A magical and country experience or something. Read their website. Read this absolute BS that is published in the name of, they now have a market cap of $300 billion, okay? They're not quite public, but their goals stated in their website, HipCamp, working direct, everybody speaks like it's some hallowed ground. There are other organizations, Canopy Under the Stars is another one. There's 2 or 3 of these, like, just, you know, that want to bring the country experience to people that, you know, I busted my fanny for 50 years to afford my property on a private road, and now we're going to have a commercial motel on the... Didn't we go through this with Airbnbs? Didn't we decide all that on Airbnbs? I fought, my wife and neighbors fought an Airbnb on a private road, which was an easement through our property. And this commission, actually no, only Wiedemann and Purnell, but you weren't there that day, voted 5-0 in opposition. You know, I would suggest that you review that use permit, and I have that in my letter today, but I'll shut up now. I can't even believe, just because I don't know, I'm not an investigative reporter for the Washington Post, but I don't know why we are even talking about this at all. It's just, there's some kind of deal that, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's interesting, and I'd like to ask Supervisor Hanchak why the Board of Supervisors ratified a letter of support for SB 620 right in the face of overwhelming public disaffection with even the idea of this, and also their own planning commission back in August, or I forget the actual dates, they're in other letters here, recommended that we don't go forward with any of this at this time, blah, blah, blah. And 2 weeks later, the supervisors sign a letter of ratification of their support letter for SB 620. Read SB 620. Have you all read that in detail and understand that there isn't a goddamn thing in it? Pardon my French.
Sir, we've gone over your time a little bit.
Thank you very much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate
Thank
it. And
you
good
very
luck
much.
with this, because we're looking at a battle.
Oh yeah, we know. All right. Please refrain from addressing the audience. All right. Any final comments from the commission?
I do. Director Krog, when you surmise what you interpreted, or you think you interpreted what we talked about, I would appreciate that you send it to us first, that we could comment back to you. And it can, if that's available, because I think that's important.
I think just practically, I think that's going to be quite challenging. So, I mean, if you want me to go through again what I summarized, that's what I'm going to put in. That what I've already stated to you guys about what I understood from the discussion here, that's what's going to go in there.
So,
because practically, I can't.
Okay, got it. So
yeah.
I got that. That's a good answer.
There's also like the Brown Act violation.
Yes, I see that. I got that. But the one thing is, will you also put in a column where we agree, where we disagree on other issues that come up on this?
I think
just what conversation, just so we have it. It's a concept.
I think with my notes, I may put at least topic areas that the commission wasn't in complete agreement on, but I'm probably not going to do a matrix table of this commissioner agrees on this, not this, and this, because I don't think that we've gotten
what
down
I'm
to,
asking.
to
just
that.
What you said is just fine.
And then any correspondence that's been received is going to be attached as part of this item as well. So any commentary that the public has provided to this commission will be attached to the item when it goes to the board for direction. And similarly, any memos that were submitted, I know Commissioner Wiedemann had a memo, that would also be part of that package that goes. So,
great, thank you very much. All right, I'm gonna wrap that one up. Okay, well, I think with that, we are finished with this item for today. All right, agenda item number 7, matters from staff. Any additional items from staff?
No matters from staff.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Agenda item number 8, any matters from the commission?
I have a couple of announcements about fun stuff that's happening in Fort Bragg, if you're curious. So we have 2 large housing projects that are going to be coming forward. One is a 68-unit market rate project. It's the first market rate project of this size that Fort Bragg has had in over 30 years. And the other is a 50-unit affordable housing project. So that's pretty big for our little town.
Where are those?
The market rate one is proposed for the corner of Ocean and Highway 1, west side of the highway, so it is coastal zone. And the affordable is on Hazelwood, which is kind of tucked behind, how is it, maybe close to the Safeway, but tucked back.
Fabulous. All right. Any other commissioners have any exciting news for the world? All right. Moving on then, agenda item number 9. I will invite a motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
You're good at making motions. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. See everybody next time.
So just so you know, HIP can't. Every